Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 11, Episode 118. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Glad you guys are back with us for this Friday show. Dave, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Happy Friday to you. It's the first Friday in June. The second OTA week of the Steelers have wrapped up. I guess that means there's one more week of those, and then kind of into that little bit of a lull period. But I don't know about you. It sure seems like the offseason's kind of moving right along here so far.
Yeah, it's been moving right along, and some Steelers news to bring you guys for this Friday show. Before I say that and we get into that, Dave, I do want to mention we'll have a little bit later in this show a Depot roundtable similar to the draft roundtable, but just with two people. This time we'll have other guests on and other Depot contributors throughout the offseason. For today's show, we have Jonathan Heitrader and Tom Mee talking about the Steelers draft picks and specifically some of the guys that they've watched the closest since the Steelers have turned the card in the 2021 NFL draft. So that interview will run in a little bit. But to the news of the day on Friday, on Thursday, we had kind of a semi-cryptic Instagram post from one Malik Hooker of him being on a plane in Pittsburgh International Airport. We didn't know if he was coming, going, what the story was there. But this morning, NFL Network's Ian Rappaport reporting Malik Hooker was indeed in Pittsburgh to visit with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now it seems like he left that visit without a contract, generally not a good sign for Steelers, free agents that get brought in. But Hooker, a Newcastle native, Western PA pedigree guy, this one makes sense, although the odds of him signing are very much in limbo right now.
Yeah, and with him being a Newcastle native, you didn't know whether it's just coming home for some good food or see mama or get some clothes washed or what have you. And remember, this is the same Malik Hooker that is now, I think, right at around 8 months removed from the dreaded Achilles injury surgery repair that he had back in, I guess, late September, early October of last season there. It'd been one thing if he wasn't from the area. It'd been a lot easier to put two and two together and get 8, or 4. But obviously Ian Rappaport kind of clarified that this morning with the report there. Not overly surprising, I don't think, at this point. Now, I was told a week and a half or so ago that up until that point there had been no interest in Malik Hooker. So, this obviously materialized probably within this last week, once teams getting past, I guess June 1st, and then taking a look at things. I don't know for sure if he's left town yet or not. I don't know if that was a coming or a going. I would think that maybe there's more of a likelihood. I don't know. But the fact of the matter is he still was not signed as of Thursday night. It's kind of rare for this team to sign during the offseason on a Friday. Not impossible, but maybe he has to go for more medical or what like that. And on top of it, just the you dig deeper into this. The Steelers have 2 starting safeties right now. Now, obviously, in Terrell Edmunds and Minkah Fitzpatrick, they could use some depth. Specifically, a guy like Malik Hooker wouldn't be bad. A guy that can really kind of play both inside the box and play the center field kind of position. But on top of it, and look, Malik Hooker obviously has had his injury woes. I mean, almost right out of the box. I mean, even going back to, I think, to his Ohio State days as well, too. You're not going to spend a lot of money on this guy, A, because you're the Pittsburgh Steelers and you just don't have the money and don't normally do that, and B, his injury history dictates that you don't do that. So he evidently has had some other visits, I think, with who? The Dallas Cowboys and the Miami Dolphins. So, if we get into Saturday and Sunday with him being unsigned, I think as we've talked about in the past, at least
Right.
history of this team. Once one of these guys gets out of town, they usually don't come back to town.
Yeah, a la Carl Joseph earlier this offseason, who came and went, and going back to the Raiders. So we'll see again. It makes sense from a local guy, pedigree guy, kind of check some of those baseline boxes Steelers look for, and if he can get past this Achilles injury, which is of course easier said than done because that's probably the most difficult injury in today's NFL to overcome. I think it's easily surpassed the torn ACL. But you talk about safety depth, as you said, is poor, especially at free safety. I think there are better options for this team at strong safety right now. And I think it's just easier to fill that void of replacing, say Terrell Edmonds, obviously, than it would be to try to replace Micah Fitzpatrick if something were to happen to him. And that may give you some more flexibility if you want to go with some even free safety type stuff in dime packages, with dime still being up in the air right now. But that's all down the road. But we'll see what happens. And I think, we'll have to watch the news cycle over the next probably 24 hours to see if a signing happens or not.
Yeah, and when you the other kind of thing here too, when you look at not that it means a hill of beans when it comes to history, but these kind of things always interest me. I was trying to think back. Here we are now in the month of June. Do the Steelers normally make any kind of sizable or near sizable or sort of kind of sizable free agent additions during the month of June? And the answer is really no. Really, if you look back historically, you could go back. In fact, one of the names I knew would be on the list, and that was Brandon Johnson, the outside linebacker, former Cincinnati Bengals, way back in, 2012. I mean, something about that signing just vividly sticks in my head, and I knew he would be on the list of researching guys that the Steelers signed in the month of June that were, not earth-shattering for free agents, but guys that you kind of raise the eyebrow on. But beyond that, I was trying to think who else has there been? And remember Bryce Harris back in 2018, the tackle that
I don't really.
Yeah,
I barely remember.
I think I wrote that up, but originally, and I had to even go back and double check that actually happened. Once again, people are probably saying Bryce who? He's a former undrafted free agent. I think he came into the league with the Atlanta Falcons. He bounced around 3 or 4 teams. I think he had 30-something total games that he appeared in. Well, I think the Steelers signed him for the minimum in June of 2018. I don't even think he made it out of the month of June. I think he had a non-football injury or something along those lines that got him shipped out of town. But going back to 2007, obviously when Mike Tomlin became the head coach, that's it. That's the list, Alex, of two. I mean, obviously there's been bottom of the barrel. Guys that have never played in the NFL, kind of guys here and there added to the Steelers roster in the month of June, dating back to that time. But as far as anybody that once again, that would be kind of, at least kind of a minor raise of the eyebrow. Oh, this guy's got an experience type guy. Unless I'm missing somebody, it's just those two, and that would be Bryce Harris in 2018 and Brandon Johnson in 2012. Brandon Johnson, by the way, he ended up sticking that year and I think appeared in something like 12 or 14 games for the Steelers that season.
All right, so we'll see if Malik Hooker becomes the third name on that list. But obviously, when they brought in Carl Joseph and they're bringing in Malik Hooker, they're identifying that the depth at safety, and I think especially free safety, is inadequate right now. And I think that's reasonable to say. So, at some point they're hopefully going to sign somebody to give them some additional depth. That they did sign Arthur Millette, who can play free safety, but he's also probably viewed as more of a slot corner for this team.
How surprised would you be right now if they sign Hooker?
Not very, just because it makes sense for them from a box checking standpoint. And, if it's assuming it's for the minimum, which I imagine it will be, or something darn near close to it, I would not be surprised by that, especially knowing that he's visited.
From a cap standpoint, the Steelers right now right at around $7 million under the cap. That obviously is really, for all practical purposes, already spoken for, as is really a good, most of the $5 million that this team would get from, restructure of Stephon Tuitt and Chris Boswell. So if you did sign a guy like Malik Hooker, and look, Hooker's probably not going to want to sign a multi-year deal either, I wouldn't think, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if he did sign a multi-year deal, it would have to be all voidable years, and would he be willing to sign for the minimum? If anything much more than the minimum, it would probably have to have some voidable years because the Steelers just don't have a lot of cap space to work with there, So unless they can talk him into a minimum benefit type deal and say, look, this is going to probably be your best opportunity to maybe, get your market value back up so you can hit free agency, that's really the only way I see that happening. So, we'll obviously watch the news cycle here, but if it doesn't happen this weekend, I know it's still early with him though too. 8 months isn't a long time from post surgery, so maybe they just wanted to look at that thing too and say, how's that Achilles holding up there, brother?
And then circle back maybe right before camp or something and bring him in. That could be a possibility, sure. All right, Dave, some other news here. It's very tragic news that we're just getting just made aware of here right before we went on air. This is according to, I believe, the New York Post, that Stephon Tuitt's brother was killed in a hit-and-run accident last night in Atlanta, the Atlanta suburb of Johns Creek. Not a lot of information is known right now, but that is the word there from the New York Post. So that is some obviously really, really tragic news for the Tuitt family.
Sure is. And, man, you just never know, do you? You hate to keep trying to punctuate that, especially someone like me and older and all like that. But, man, a person's life can change in just 1 second there. So tomorrow's never promised, and very, very, very sad to see that come across the Twitter machine about a half an hour ago there. So obviously our thoughts and prayers go out to his family and loved ones.
Yeah, absolutely. Difficult as it is to segue from that, Dave. I do want to get back to some news that occurred yesterday. Steelers finishing up their second week of OTAs and had some players speaking with the media. That included Chase Claypool and B.J. Finney. Dave, I'll start here with B.J. Finney saying, of course, all the right things. Happy to be back in Pittsburgh. Hopefully, just wants to be in a place where he's not going to be moving a lot. He had to go through the ringer of moving coast to coast, basically, last season. He said he went from Pittsburgh back home to Kansas City, then to Seattle, then he got traded to the Cincinnati Bengals, and of course now back in Pittsburgh. So hoping to find some stability with the Pittsburgh Steelers part 2.
I think he classified it as whirlwind, didn't he? And I can only imagine, especially doing all that in during a pandemic. And I mean, it just how happy do you think he is to be back, kind of back to kind of square one, if you will, there? And I thought he was very open and honest, talking about. Because we had already heard some semblance of the story. I think Fowler or somebody else from ESPN had reported this not long ago about the situation that Finney was in, about with the pandemic and not being able to find a place to work out. Didn't want to run the risk of getting injured, and then because of that, basically showed up for the Seahawks out of shape, and the dominoes start falling there. Then he ends up in Cincinnati, doesn't play much there. I mean, it was just one thing after the other with him, and I thought he spelled it out good. Look, and I think he who was the recent tackle that Denver just cut because of
Juwan James.
Yeah, Juwan James. He even made sure to point out that as an example. You see what happened to James there, and this was the first real money that he had the opportunity to make. And if he would have trained outside of the facility and got himself injured or whatnot, wouldn't have gotten that money there. So it was really a kind of a weird situation for him to be in. And he flat out said that he showed up kind of fat and out of shape, And obviously now back in Pittsburgh, he said the Steelers didn't waste any time, once he became a free agent, jumping on him. You and I kind of predicted that would happen going all the way back to before he even became a free agent there.
Right.
And, it made a lot of sense there to get him done on the cheap there. He's going to obviously, and what else would he say? He's going to compete hard for a job there, and go from there. But I thought he was very, very open and honest, and he, obviously talked about the running game and how the emphasis on being kind of more nasty and they know they've got to get that running game back going in 2021.
Yeah, he said as much, and he says, the whole NFL world knows it right now. He says, quote, I mean, honestly, that's not the talk just in our room, but across the whole building and across the whole NFL. Everybody's like, what is the Steelers' run game going to look like? We know we have to come out with an edge. We have to be nasty about it. Talked about, the old 3 yards in a cloud of dust, as the bus would say. And so that's kind of the mentality he hopes to bring to this team, and the mentality they've talked about all summer. And that's all well and good. And so I think that point's been extremely well established, that they need to be more physical, they want to be nastier, and they want to be a better run blocking team. So now it's just all about results, and can they accomplish that? And that remains to be seen.
Now, are we talking 3 yards in a cloud of dust on 2nd and 3 or 3rd and 3 or 3rd and 1? Because first down and 10 and 3 yards in a cloud of dust, Alex, is not a successful run.
Yeah, I don't want hey little Harris up the middle.
Right. Now, albeit if you gained 3 yards every time and had no penalties, you would never lose a ball game. So assuming you went for it, obviously on 4th down, but I hate to get into semantics there. No, obviously I'm just having some fun here, but yeah, look, I mean, we've heard now from 3 offensive linemen, and I think the message has been sent and is being conveyed pretty clear by Adrian Clem, and that's they got to get this running game, run blocking going. They got to be more aggressive. They got to have a nastiness kind of swagger to them. I wouldn't be surprised if you see a couple more penalties maybe this year, maybe some over aggressiveness, probably some Chris Chemo Otto aggressiveness after the whistle kind of stuff that we had a couple years ago. But you got to get that swagger back, and I think once again that message has been sent.
And I thought it was interesting. Finney did talk about the energy the offensive line has right now, and I think that's probably a really good point, because some of these guys have that chip on their shoulder, and they're hungry, and they're competing for spots, and they really haven't proven, by and large, sans David DeCastro, they haven't proven a whole lot in the NFL, whether you're talking to Kevin Dotson, to Zach Banner, who's probably got the biggest chip on his shoulder of all, a core of 4, Kendrick Green, and even Finney himself. So I think there'll be certainly an infusion of energy there in the youthfulness of this group, and just this group really chomping at the bit to try to prove people wrong, and of course do their job so they can have a long, steady, successful NFL career.
Right.
Anything else from BJ Finney he talked about that you want to touch on, Dave?
No, I think we covered most of it, right? Just talking about the running game, talking about his roundabout way of getting back to Pittsburgh there. I don't think we missed anything else there, did we?
Right. Well, I should mention as well, and again, this is some additionally, sad news, but BJ Finney was talking about Tunch Ilkin, and Ilkin officially announced his retirement as a Steelers broadcaster yesterday. Obviously, he got diagnosed with ALS last year and has been battling that ever since. And so BJ Finney said some really nice comments about what Tunch meant to him and meant to offensive linemen, about the mentorship, and how he would try to help those guys whenever he could. And so very much an outpouring of support for Tunch Ilkin yesterday on social media. And I've never met Tunch personally, but always respected his work as an analyst. Obviously, a really good tackle for the Pittsburgh Steelers in the 80s, and by all accounts, one of the best people when it comes to being a Pittsburgh Steeler, and embodies what it means to be a Pittsburgh Steeler on and off the field. So definitely, rooting for, and just thoughts with the Ilkin family through this obviously difficult time.
Boy, and he was one of those versatile guys too. I think during his NFL game, I think he logged a couple snaps there at guard, and if didn't he log a snap or two at center here and there?
Well, he played predominantly right tackle in his career, right? I remember because I read his book actually earlier this year. It's a fantastic book, great look into his story and playing days and post playing days. He says that he was really only comfortable at right tackle. He tried to learn left tackle and he played some of it, but just never really felt like that was his spot. So I think he did have that versatility, but right tackle was always kind of where he felt at home. Yeah,
and boy, you want to talk about broadcasting career. I put this out on Twitter yesterday, really had quote unquote a radio, that kind of that throwback sports radio voice, really kept you enthralled when you listened to the radio broadcast. I mean, you could. He might have been the original Tony Romo. That utter excitement in his voice, and plus him being a former player. I mean, how many times did he correctly predict what either the Steelers were going to run or what the opposition was going to run, a la kind of Romo? And how good was he after the fact? As providing color of diagnosing what maybe went right or wrong on a run there, and just I like those guys that aren't overly formal on the radio calling games, and just the camaraderie that you have. Hey Wolf, just calling
Right.
down, and that kind of stuff. He definitely had his own kind of signature, and that's what you kind of look for. You don't kind of look for these. You definitely knew at the moment that you heard his voice who he was.
Mm-hmm.
And if you didn't, it didn't take long to catch on to his kind of style there. So I mean, I don't know how many times just listening back, especially with Game Pass. Even today it gives you the ability to listen to the to the radio, and it, I don't know how many times during games something would happen, and the TV announcer wouldn't spend a lot of time or much time or no time diagnosing what happened. You go over there and find that spot on the radio spot, and sure enough, there's Tunch probably breaking down the play. So those shoes will not easily be filled for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said there, Dave. And again, if you want to pick up his book, it's called In the Locker Room, Tales of the Pittsburgh Steelers from the Playing Field to the Broadcast Booth. I picked it up a little while ago, but I got a chance to read it this year, and just one of my favorite books I read this year. So I encourage you guys to pick this one up.
Sure sucks getting old, doesn't it?
Yeah. So again, thoughts and prayers with Tunch and the Yokin family. Again, Dave, going back to what happened at OTAs yesterday, in addition to BJ Finney, Chase Claypool spoke to the media, had a good conversation there talking about what to expect for the Steelers offense in 2021. And, one point that he touched on, and something you've discussed a lot, we discussed in the last episode with Claypool specifically, especially coming out of college, was some of this deep passing game, and can they improve that? And Claypool knows that he and the rest of this group has to help out their quarterback too, to improve this vertical passing game and be more efficient downfield.
Yeah, I thought he's learned to play the game pretty good, hasn't he? The media game. Maybe that comes from coming out of a big time program such as Notre Dame. He's learned to kind of keep, or he's doing a better job, I think, especially after late last season, talking about the Browns and all like that. I imagine he's going to start choosing his words a little bit more careful moving forward here. Talking about the boy, I sound like Peter Brady, and I know that reference means absolutely nothing in my I feel a lot. I probably still sound bad, but I feel like 13 times better than I did the other day. It's just trying to get the body to keep up with how I'm feeling there. So if I sound like I'm Peter Brady voice changing, then I apologize here. But Claypool was asked about the Steelers' offensive deep passing woes in 2020, and then was asked specifically if there's anything he thinks the wide receivers can do in 2021 to ensure it improves. And I liked his answer, Alex. I really did, and I ended up making a terrible take out of it yesterday afternoon because I liked his answer so much there. He talked about it. He said, obviously we have to complete those contested catches. He says, I know I had a couple that I could have come down with, and then when we were on the same page, meaning with timing, and so continuing to work on that and getting more separation downfield. Obviously, the more the better. Staying healthier down the stretch will always help too. That might not sound like he said all that much, but when you go back and you kind of look at the statistics and look. Like it or not, talking about Ben Roethlisberger and the deep ball is something that needs to happen. The criticism needs to be there for whatever reason, however much you want to put on Ben or whoever. That kind of stuff has got to get better. And once again, you and I just talked about on a recent show, it's not for his lack of trying. For God's sakes, he threw the fourth most deep ball attempts in the NFL in 2020, talking about passes of 20 yards or more. However, he only completed 30% of them. And that's where the problem is, or most of the problem. Now, obviously, you can dig down deeper and go into the average intended yards per pass, average completed yards, depth of target, and all like that. But it wasn't that he didn't go downfield. It's just that he wasn't connecting when he did go downfield there. So looking at Claypool specifically and kind of taking the finger and off of Roethlisberger and kind of pointing it back maybe a little bit to the receivers a little bit more, he was 20 or more yards down the field. Claypool was targeted 31 times in total in 2020, yet he only caught 9 of those. As for his deep contested targets in 2020, PFF has Claypool down for 14 of those. So 14 of those 31 deep pass targets, non-penalty plays. I got something to say about that in a minute. 14 of those 31, he caught just 4 of those. So what's that little animated GIF? No lies detected. In here, there are no lies detected in here. He has got to do a better job with coming down with some of those, contested catches in general, but specifically down the field in this case. Now, he had 2 drops on deep passes last season. As a whole, you get thrown 31 deep balls. You drop 2. Is that awful? No, but I'm sure you'd probably tell you one is one too many there. So there is that aspect of it. Now, Claypool, going back to his Notre Dame tape, one of the things that stuck out was his ability to contested catch, not only near the line of scrimmage, but really specifically deep down the field. So it isn't like this is anything new to him when that he's being asked to do. It's really what was on his resume at Notre Dame there. So look, he was the highest targeted wide receiver. And in fact, he was the only 2 other wide receivers I think had more deep targets than he did last season, and that was Ridley with Atlanta, and obviously Tyreek Hill. So this is the kind of thing that we should probably expect him to continually be the Steelers' deeper pass target in 2021. If he catches a few more of those, and a couple of the other guys catch a few more of those, man, maybe we can turn that 30%. Connection rate on Roethlisberger into 36, 37, right around in there, and so a lot of people will probably just skim past that quote of the contested catches and all, but there is something to that, and it was it's good to him saying that lets us kind of know that at least that's being addressed, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good to hear that out loud and make sure that they know that that's an area that they have to improve upon. I think it's a pretty obvious area for himself and for the offense as a whole. But yeah, Claypool really should be the primary vertical threat this year, because Juju's Roundtree hopefully is going to expand some, but still going to be working the slot a lot. And then Deontay Johnson, is not going to run a ton of deep routes or run the whole Roundtree, of course, but he's going to be more the 3-step game and the slants and just kind of based on what the quarterback's leverage is. So Claypool's really got to be the guy that can be that vertical Z receiver. Now they're going to mix and match and they're going to move around, but when I think about who's the primary deep ball guy, it's going to be the 6'4" receiver who runs 4.4. I want him to be in that role, and so obviously Ben needs to have some improvement with his accuracy and things like that. But Claypool's got to show improvement as well. So I don't want to put all the deep ball woes solely on Ben, because I think it's obviously a unit wide thing.
Right, absolutely, and that was kind of why I wanted to go that angle, and kind of what I said in look, a lot of it does fall on the quarterback, okay, but when you're looking at contested catches, in the NFL, boy, you better come down with 50% of those, I would think. Especially 20 yards down the field. Obviously every attempt's different, needs to be looked at in a vacuum there. But and for those of you right now that are thinking, well, there goes Dave hates Chase Claypool. Look, I was the one tooting his horn last season about all those deep pass interference. I brought that stat kind of to the forefront, that everybody said, well, how do they know? And I think Ed Bouchette said, well, they're a blog, and it's what we do, and Claypool, I think, is the, he was right up there with Mike Evans as leader in not only pass interference penalties drawn, pass interference yardage drawn, and specifically when looking at deep passes, and obviously a deep pass in the NFL is more than 15 yards down the line of scrimmage. He was up there in that category as well too. So yeah, look, those don't show up in the box score, right, Alex? But I mean, it's huge hidden yardage that we talk about all the time. So that aspect, he needs to be praised, I think, Claypool, when it comes to that portion of the deep ball that doesn't show up in these other stats. However, if you start coming down with a few more of these down the field, especially these contested catch types, that can really change the change the overall complex of the stats. And look, one or two of those might end up in the end zone and change a game as well.
Yeah, no, I think the key word there, as you said, is hidden yardage, and even I forget about that sometimes when thinking about the Steelers' vertical game, that there were a ton of pass interference calls. You can't rely solely on that. You can't build your offense around it. You can't go all, Joe Flacco, Baltimore Ravens on building your brand around just hoping for a flag. But that was something the Steelers were, I guess, quote unquote, successful at getting last year, and that's probably something that's at least worth mentioning. So I'm glad you did.
And especially third down type situations, I mean, look, every one of those are important there. And, here's the thing, going back to the deep ball again. The reason to have some, I guess, optimism here when it comes and as Alex and I roll through all the years, on Wednesday, going back to Ben and the deep ball, as long as you can still put it out there 40 yards down the field, which I firmly believe Ben can at least do that. You look at a guy like Tom Brady, who doesn't have the strongest arm, right? And never has really been known as having one of the strongest arms. You look at the way he was able to increase his deep ball completion percentage at his age last season. I think that's enough of a reason to think that Ben can get this thing going in the other direction. Now, the whole, I think you and I had the conversation, is what can he get it to, and is that good enough? Well, I'll say this: the lower that completion percentage is, I think the more better you need your defense to be, because you're just probably not getting the amount of explosive plays that, to help offset some things there. So that's kind of a loose kind of analysis there. But you can bet for sure that's one thing we're going to be tracking right out of the chute. And obviously coming off of Ben's comments the other day talking about I reserve judgment for, my arm, yada, yada, yada. I mean, you go back to late last year. I've been pulling up a couple. I don't know if you've seen on my Twitter feed. I mean, the guy can still throw the football down the field, all right? And he did that last year and completed. It just goes back to, once again, the accuracy and the ability to connect more on a higher percentage. And one other project that I'm working on that I promised, and you and I have talked about a little bit as well too. I started a project of going back to 2016, going through all the deep ball connections that Roethlisberger has had on balls of 20 yards or more. I'm looking for several things in there. I'm looking for, was he under center? I'm looking for, was there play action? And I'm looking for, was it a result of the extended play? And be quite honest with you, I've only made it through, 10 half of the 2016 season, there weren't a lot of extended plays in there. There were a couple of play action plays in there, but for the most part, it's about probably what you would expect to find in the Ben Roethlisberger tape there. A lot of it was timed, Sammy Coates, man, did you realize Sammy Coates could get some separation?
Yeah, the dude, everything was good about him but the hands.
Right.
The mental aspect of it.
That kid could get some separation down the field. It's just everything else he couldn't do. But, those are just one of the projects we'll be looking at the rest of the offseason when it comes to Ben Roethlisberger and the deep ball.
Cool. Yeah, again, we're watching the run game. We're watching the deep ball. We know the story of the Steelers offense last year was such a limited menu of things to work. There was no run game. The vertical pass game sputtered throughout the entire season. You really just had that short, medium pass game, and that was about the only thing working. But I'm very curious to see that study, and finding those play action completions is like the Willy Wonka golden ticket. I guess I'm not sure how many of those exist, but I'll be definitely interested to see the numbers on that. All right, Dave. Chase Claypool also talking about other things he's working on this offseason. He is trying to strengthen the little deficiencies in his body to have the deficiencies of a 6'4", 220-pound, 23-year-old receiver in the NFL. He says he's working on the right side of his body because he's left side dominant. He says he wants to have more balance in that area, and he's going to continue to work with former Bengals wide receiver T.J. Hushmanzada. They worked out last year, so they're going to reunite this offseason.
Same.
Yeah, you have little deficiencies. Are you left side dominant too?
I am working on both my right and left side because I'm zero side dominant.
You're trying to find a dominant side.
I'm trying to find a dominant side. No, look, that's something else. I would like to hear a little bit more about that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what he means by that in terms of what he's trying to work on exactly.
I found it kind of a compelling revelation, if you will. How many times have you heard really any player talk about working on one side of their body other than the other side of the body because one side being more dominant than the other. So I'd like to learn a little bit more about what he means by that.
Yeah, I hear it with linemen, that are right hand, left hand dominant. Maybe they've only lined up in a stance with just their left hand. They want to, get more comfortable being in a right-handed stance and obviously with their punch and things like that. But I never really heard it with a receiver too much. So I'm sure there's a valid reason. As you said, I would love to hear more information about that. But he didn't expand on that in his interview yesterday. So I don't know when he's going to talk again to the media.
What about the talk about the run blocking and the wide receivers?
Yeah, he mentioned that as well, that they want to work on run blocking as part of just, improving this run game at every single level, not just the offensive line run blocking, but the tight ends run blocking and the receivers run blocking as well. Claypool said, quote, "We're not just going to be blocking corners and stuff. We're going to come down in the box with some schemes, with some run schemes and run fits. We're excited. We're ready to get our hands dirty." So obviously a big body like Claypool, like Juju, James Washington, all those guys I think are very competent blockers, and hopefully they can improve this run game. And really, when it comes to downfield blocking, that's kind of what defines the good versus great runs. A good run of 10 yards can become a great run of 20 plus if you get that really strong third level blocking or even second level blocking by a receiver cracking a safety or just making an extra block downfield, getting in the way. That's generally kind of what takes you to that next level when it comes to your explosive run game.
Yeah, I thought it was funny. And the audio there's a mess up in the audio during the Zoom there, so you can't hear exactly what Claypool said there. But I thought it was interesting. He said something about, I think, Deontay and Ray not excited about blocking linebackers, something along those lines. Once again, it's hard to get the exact quota out of that because of kind of the garbled, some garbledness happened there right at the end of the Zoom there. But look, I'm all for it. I put this out on the Twitter machine, I think back in February, that I think regardless of what happened with Juju this offseason, that I thought that there's a good possibility you could see Claypool play more in that kind of that big slot role. And since then we've heard Juju talk about him maybe being able to play more outside. I just get the sense, and you probably as you as well at this point here, Alex, that These receivers are going to probably be moving around quite a bit here in this offense. It's another great thing. Look, here's the thing about it, though. How many people, Deontay Johnson's still going to be your backside X primarily, right? Because he gets off the line and all those kind of things. That's his best fit specifically. However, we have seen Deontay be able to take the lid off of some things deep there. So occasionally you're probably going to want to put him in the Z, maybe occasionally sometimes in the slot as well. You've got an experienced wide receiver room there. You've got you have a new offensive coordinator in Matt Canada, but he was with this team obviously last season there. Ike Hilliard another year in that wide receiver room. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to move these guys around a little bit more to keep opponents guessing sometime as well too. And I think part of that, seeing Claypool play in that big slot a little bit more, especially maybe in some run situations. One of the obviously the positive things about him coming out of Notre Dame was his ability when collapsed a little bit, more inside the numbers there, was his ability to help out in the blocking game there. He's more than willing to do that, him and Juju both, obviously. So I think we will see a little bit more of that this year.
Yeah, and to your point, I think we'll see these guys mix and match their spots a lot, and that happened actually quite a bit last year, where it was a lot less defined than it had been in seasons past of, okay, you're the X, you're the Z, you're the F slot receiver. It was those guys moving all around, so I think that will only continue even under a new OC in Matt Canada. So I think primarily, of course, you still have Deontay as the X. I think Claypool more the Z-type, Juju in the slot, but those guys are not glued and stuck in that position. In the old days of AB, things were a little more static because AB was always the X, and that kind of didn't allow other guys to move around quite as much. But I think things have changed right now.
Right, and look, I mean, there are skill sets that obviously do fit players better than other players, right?
Sure.
But once again, I think when you look at specifically at a guy like Deontay Johnson, like I said, this is a guy that, what a great quick. I mean, one of the better guys probably off of the line as far as getting separation goes, right?
Yeah, his releases are fantastic. One of the best parts of his game.
All right, and then on top of it, though, I mean, he is still a guy that can with that release has enough of the speed that he can, as a Z, if you get him singled up in the right matchup, there he can run past people. On the outside, so you can use him more in that Z role. I don't know how much maybe necessarily you can use him in the slot. But I would just expect to see more of that moving forward, just part of this offensive maturation and move forward under Matt Canada to kind of mix and match these guys a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think one of the key themes here will be versatility, and I think you'll see that in a lot of different ways, but I think you'll see that in terms of where these receivers line up as well. So, Dave, anything else you wanted to cover from OTAs and guys that have spoken with the media over the last couple of days?
Did we cover, I'm not sure, did we cover what all Cameron Sutton and those guys said the other day?
That's a good question. Actually, we might not have, because I think that happened. We did the show on Wednesday, but I think that happened after we recorded on Wednesday. But just nothing too, because it was James Washington and Cam Sutton. And James Washington, pretty quiet guy, didn't have a whole lot to say. So he's not thinking about his future with the Steelers, being a free agent after the season. Cam Sutton said he had every intention of re-signing with the Steelers, and of course is glad that he did.
The one of the main takeaway, boy, Cameron Sutton likes to talk, doesn't he? Yeah. You ask him something that probably could suffice to have like a 2-sentence answer, and you get about 4 paragraphs out of him there. I don't think we overly learned all that much out of. We probably learned more from the James Washington interview, which was obviously much shorter and a lot shorter answers than we did about from what Cameron Sutton said. He was good about not telling us exactly where he's going to be lining up, especially in sub-package situations there.
I don't think he knows where he's lining up.
And that's where I'm kind of going. I don't think he really knows, yet as well, too. I think it's one of those kind of to be determined kind of things on a game by game plan, situational type thing. And look, this team, obviously with them looking at a guy like Malik Hooker, maybe this team isn't done adding just yet. So he is smart enough, obviously, to do that, to play inside, to play outside. I think there are going to be situations where he does play inside. I'm just not sure that we're probably not going to have a good grasp of it until we get into the season and you start charting this kind of stuff to find out, who where he's more likely to be in certain sub-package type situations there. So, we got a lot of words out of him on Thursday there, but I don't think we got a lot of info. James Washington talking about wanting to get leaner and quicker and that kind of stuff there. So what else did we learn from Washington?
That was, I think, let me double check here. That's probably just about it. Again, not focused on his future, just focused on the here and now and trying to make 2021 the best season possible. Talked about the versatility of the room, as we just mentioned, discussing Chase Claypool, and also had good things to say about Dwayne Haskins, saying he was a really good guy and personable, and certainly someone that James Washington is rooting for this summer.
What are your early kind of thoughts on James Washington and potential numbers? I mean, obviously, health and all plays a big role in that, yada yada. But just on, in a perfect world, perfect vacuum, where do you view James Washington in 2021?
Yeah, I think it'll be inconsistent just based on playing time. And he's kind of been a feast famine guy where he's, the vertical player. And so sometimes you'll have, if you hit, you get a big day. If you don't hit, then you have a pretty quiet day. Whenever you asked that question on Twitter yesterday, whenever I happened to look at it, it said there were 31 replies. And I kind of felt like the number in my head of catches for him is like 30, 31. He had 30 this past season. So I think we'll probably be in that 25 to 35 range. And again, I think you'll just see, an up and down season where you'll have one good game, then a quiet game, just because of the nature of being probably that quote unquote fourth receiver, and then just being the vertical guy. If it hits, you have a nice day. If it doesn't, it's a pretty quiet one.
I mean, obviously, over the last couple of years, or at least since he's been drafted, we've seen the Steelers do some things with obviously 4 wide receivers on the field before, but we're not overly expecting a lot of that, I don't think, this year, right?
I mean, it's really only happened when they've had to. The Baltimore game last year where the offense was a mess and they just had to, they were down big at the half and they had to kind of really go hurry up, and Baltimore never had a good answer for that. It kind of limited their blitz packages and things like that. So I think it's still more of a situational thing. It's nothing even close to a base game plan type of thing. Again, we'll see under a new OC exactly how Matt Canada handles it. But yeah, I don't expect, 10 personnel to be a frequent package of Steelers employ.
Here's what Mike Clay put out a couple of weeks ago after the draft here. 40 targets for James Washington.
Okay.
23 receptions, 323 yards, 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, I remember we had looked at that, I think, whenever Clay published those. I mean, that's, a little step down from last year, but if you sit there and say you take Washington's, 2020 numbers and reduce 10% off of them because Claypool's role is going to expand, kind of being the guy from week 1, I mean, I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, I think the only way he hits kind of the 40 reception number is if there's an injury to one of these guys that lets him get on the field a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
I would think, what is the proper over-under in receptions with him? 35?
Because he only had 30 last year, so
that's
I might,
true.
Around 30, I might do like 27.
Clay's got it, once again, Clay's got him down for 23, so is maybe 23 the right number?
Yeah, I mean, it is a 17-game season, so I guess we have to keep factoring that extra game. Not that means a ton, maybe 2-3 more catches, but I would probably say, right around 28-30 as the over-under.
All right. You sure would like to see a couple of those come down the field, though, wouldn't you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for him it's about making those catches count because he's not catching 60 balls this year. So can he make, if he catches 30, can, 7 of them or something be, 20-plus yards, and can he find the end zone 3 times? Like, that's the kind of season he has to have, just maximize that opportunity, because if everyone stays healthy, there's not going to be a ton of opportunity there for James Washington.
Right.
All right, Dave, I want to get to our Depot roundtable now. Really good discussion, about an hour long, with Jonathan Heitritter and Tom Mee, 2 awesome contributors and team members of Steelers Depot, talking about the Steelers draft, and we'll have more guys on in the future, I'm sure. But for now, here is myself, Dave, Jonathan, and Tom. And welcome back to the Terrible Podcast. And as promised, we were going to have on some of our Depot crew that covered the draft so well for us last month. Maybe it's a little bit overdue to have these guys back on, but with, mini camps and OTAs happening right now and getting to see some of these rookies and kind of get a feel for what their impact may be in 2021, figured it was a good time to have these guys on. Got two guests today. I'm sure we'll have more on in the future. We have Jonathan Heitritter and we have Tom Mead. Guys, how you doing? Jonathan, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me again, guys. Just been great to be able to follow along with everything that's going on with OTAs and minicamp and being able to talk about some of the guys the Steelers drafted and some other guys drafted that we had discussions about around the league.
Absolutely. Tom, how are you?
I'm doing well. Kudos to everybody on the team and all the work they've done. These articles have been fantastic to keep me updated, and it's nice to see these guys in camp again and getting some work in.
Absolutely, yeah. Can't thank the guys enough. You guys and the whole Depot team have done an incredible job. So let's kind of just dive right in. And, I want to kind of focus on the guys that you and Tom and Jonathan have really focused on and written about the most the last couple of weeks. But I'll start with Naji Harris because obviously he was the team's first-round pick at number 24. Jonathan, I know that you profiled Harris in terms of the short yardage, success or failure in an evaluation of his game there, how important it is for Pittsburgh to improve upon that area. So just overall, your thoughts on the pick of Naji Harris, and then specifically, how do you think he'll help the Steelers' short yardage issues?
Yeah, just going based off the pick of Naji Harris at 24, I think that was what a lot of overall media cycles were kind of projecting with what the pick was. And obviously, Pittsburgh kind of stuck with that pick. Naji was the pick. And right now, from everything that we're seeing, he's looking like he's going to be the guy going forward, hopefully going to be that Mike Tomlin lead back that we want to have going forward to lead that offense and hopefully bring the run game back to where it needs to be going into 2021. But highlighting a couple of his articles. So like the one of the I wrote up was about him in short yardage and goal line situations. So I kind of looked at it from the perspective, okay, what did he do to create for himself versus what did he do for his offensive line? Because often one of the things that you heard as a knock against Naji Harris was the fact that, he played behind one of the best offensive lines in the nation at Alabama. So really he didn't have to do a whole lot. And while he did have it where there was occasions where he had big holes for him to run through, he is very elusive and very shifty, especially behind the line of scrimmage. And that's something that you have highlighted too, Alex, in your studies of Naji Harris, and his ability to be able to get skinny, be able to have great vision and being able to cut back and make a defender miss with elusiveness. But then you also throw in the fact that he stands at 6'2", 230 pounds and can be a wrecking ball and usually takes more than one person to bring him down on contact. So not only do you have a back that has the elusiveness of a smaller back, but also the size to go through, go over, or go around somebody. So overall, just what he provides to the Steelers offense is something that athletically they haven't had since Le'Veon Bell. And honestly, based off the film assessment, you can honestly probably say he's maybe a little bit a tier above as an athlete than what Le'Veon Bell was coming into Pittsburgh initially.
Yeah, I think that's something that gets overlooked because you're right. He played in such a good offense, but he was able to create. He got yards on his own. It wasn't just, solely the benefit of playing behind a great Alabama offensive line. So you think that he'll be able to help this short yardage situation, or do you think the question marks on the offensive line still have that answer up in the air?
Oh, I definitely think that he'll be able to help. So you just look at his overall conversion rate on his short yardage situations in comparison to the other backs. Granted, that's college playing behind Alabama versus in the pros playing behind Pittsburgh's offensive line last season. But I would say with the emphasis of being more physical with the offensive line, granted, there's a lot of questions up front. You have his ability and his vision. Like I just wrote a piece about the potential backup options behind Naji Harris heading into 2021. And while you saw options with the guys that they have, you did see occasions and lapses where they weren't able to read the hole correctly. Whereas with Harris, in a couple of the clips that I provided in my article talking about his short yardage situations, you see his quick decision to be able to hit a hole hard, or being able to put a shoulder into a defender and pick up the 2 or 3 yards necessary to either move the sticks or put the ball in the end zone. So overall, like with the abysmal success rates that Pittsburgh has had the last couple of years, I do think that Naji will be able to affect that in a positive way. And then anything that the offensive line can do on top of that will just be good addition going
right.
forward.
Yeah, I hope so. They need to. 20 of 36 running the ball on third and short last year, and that was the worst mark in football, and that has to change. Tom, for people that follow the articles, especially draft time, you're our value guy. You're the guy that determines whether or not the Steelers got good value with the man that they took. And so running back, such a divisive, almost third-rail position when it comes to round number one. What is your assessment of the value or potential lack thereof in taking Naji Harris at 24?
Well, we've talked about it before about taking a running back in the first round, and I think at least a few of us are not on that page of doing that. But in this case, he was clearly the best back on the board. He's a complete back. He's going to be a 3-down back. Like Jonathan said, the guys last year had trouble finding holes, and his vision is very good. He'll be the best pass receiver out of the backfield since Le'Veon Bell. I don't think the Steelers had a touchdown pass to any running backs last year. So he's definitely going to improve there. And value-wise, at the bottom of the first round, most teams probably only have 15 to 18 guys with first-round grades. So you're looking to get the person that's going to help you the most there. And based on last year's production from the running backs and the struggles with the offensive line, he's definitely going to give the offense a big step up.
Mm-hmm. Dave, I'm just curious. I know we've kind of talked about the value a lot throughout the discussion between us of Naji Harris, but where have you kind of settled in at when it comes to the value? Because I know you're obviously the king of fungibility when it comes to the running back position.
Well, look, I mean, as we stated right out of shoot, this was, in my opinion, he was the number one running back in this year's draft class. I did look real deep at both, or not only him, but Javonte Williams and all this Travis Etienne as well too. But you kept going back and looking at the all around factor. It's not hard to find. Obviously, a large portion of clips of Naji catching the football out of the backfield, him doing things not only after first contact. Look, a lot of people say, and Jonathan hit on this, there were situations where he did have big holes. Yes, he ran behind a great offensive line. But once that first contact happened, whether it be through an open hole or through him creating on his own or even catching the football out of the backfield. He was very good at the first contact. I mean, and I was surprised, after the fact, and it's amazing how much you learn about players even after after the draft is over. Boy, up and over. Boy, he's not afraid to go up and over people. The amount of hurtling that he did throughout his college career is incredible. I have since contextualized all of his pass targets at Alabama. You and I talked specifically about how well he did yards after the catch. That's a stat that sometimes he behind the line of scrimmage. Sometimes with him catching the football behind the line of scrimmage, a lot of times that's hidden yardage that a lot of people don't talk about there. His pass protection is not hard to find clips on that. That's good. So I mean, just on overall. Yes, he was the best running back in this year's draft class. I think Tom hit on a good point there as well, too. How many players probably had first round grades on them? And even if you didn't have a true first round grade on Naji, you obviously probably had a high, very, very high second round grade on him. And then you get into the need versus the want, and, everything that goes along with it. We all knew that the Steelers were probably going to get a running back in the first couple rounds of the draft. The fact that, the question marks had begun at kind of the tackle position. We knew they weren't going to go guard in the first round. We thought maybe there was a chance that they would go center in the first round, and really had it boiled down to kind of two players, I think, with one of them having an injury concern and Landon Dickerson there. So, I guess the better question is at this point is who else would you have taken? Right. And you're probably your answer to that probably, Alex, is Creed Humphrey. Yep. Mine would probably have been Landon. Quite possibly, but regardless, he was the best player at his position on the board, and they weren't afraid to fungibility be damned.
And if you ask Bill Barnwell, the Steelers should have taken Christian Darrisaw like 23. So I don't know how that's supposed to work.
Yeah, the Jedi mind trick. That's the aspect that Kevin Colbert hasn't mastered yet. Real quick, while we're on the subject, while we have Jonathan and Tom answering questions on this, what should the expectations be, line and all? All right. I mean, obviously, there's going to be a lot of question marks about this offensive line going into this season. What should the expectations with Naji Harris be, especially when we talk about successful run rates, and then when we talk about total touches, and then total yards?
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and cover this topic. So I actually wrote an article not too long ago about Nacho Harris and his potential in fantasy football, kind of correlating to his overall touches and what you could see him as a runner as well as a receiver. And one thing that you kind of look at is, the lead back in Mike Tomlin's offense often gets fed the football a lot on the ground. So you're looking at an average, at factoring in injury, about 250 to 270 touches at a minimum in just carries. And then in terms of receptions, going back to the Bell years, from the time that Le'Veon Bell was a rookie to the time that he left town and James Conner took over before in that 12-game sample size before he got hurt, the lead running back averaged about 63 receptions per season. So if you kind of factor that out, I dialed the receptions back, but increased the carries to think that, okay, Naji Harris could expect anywhere from 270 carries, which puts him in that Josh Jacobs realm, which I would say that that's pretty expected, that you could expect that for a guy like Naji Harris to be comparable to Josh Jacobs in terms of a carry amount. But then in terms of receiver, being in that 40 to 50 reception range as well, too, especially in a 17-game season, is not out of the question. So you're going to have him probably well over 300 touches from the get-go. So based off of that, you have to look at the pick, kind of like when you're justifying the pick, whether or not it was justified as a running back. But we can look at it in the same situation as Le'Veon Bell, where he is a running back one, but he's also a wide receiver too in the way that he produces. Not only is he great out of the backfield, but you see him line out wide. Like I've had ties to the Florida Gators, and I talk to them every month. And I talked to the coaching staff after the Alabama game and the SEC championship game, and they said we flat out could not stop 22. Like we game plan for Devontae Smith, we game plan to stop the passing game, and Naji Harris tore us apart because of how they were able to use him out of the backfield. There's one play where he lined out wide to the right, had it where he ran an option route. The linebacker didn't cover him, and then he cut back inside, took it over, stiff-armed one of Marco Wilson into the end zone for a touchdown. Another play, he goes ahead, catches it out of the backfield, pulls a reverse spin move in open field, and is able to truck another defender into the end zone for a touchdown. So just his ability to produce in the receiving game, I don't even think we've seen his ceiling for that yet, especially in a Matt Canada-led offense where you're seeing pre-snap motions and just the ability to get him in space. He's going to tear apart linebackers as a receiver, and then you have to factor that in with their weapons they have on the outside as him as a runner too, because they're going to have to respect the receiving threats that we have with Claypool, with Deontay Johnson, with Juju Smith-Schuster. So he's going to not see probably the loaded boxes that you would expect based off the receiving options they have available. So to say that he can be a running back one and a wide receiver two, I projected him to be anywhere from 15 to 1,700 total yards. And obviously he had a high touchdown rate at Alabama. So I think 9, 10 plus touchdowns is not out of the question either.
Tom, go ahead. What is your thought on year one for Naji Harris?
Yeah, I think Jonathan is spot on. Just looking at average numbers, if he averages 18 carries a game or 18 touches a game, that's going to put him over 300 touches right there, and that's not a lot. And same thing for rushing yards. If he averages 70 a game, that's going to put him at 1,200 yards. You want to add another 3, 4, maybe 500 yards in receiving, and that's right where Jonathan's number is at like 1,700. He's going to be – they talk so much about running the ball more. He's going to be a focus of the offense, and they're going to use him. So I think Jonathan's numbers are spot on.
Yeah,
right, one quick, and you and I talked about this the other day, Alex, as well too. Though, okay, we definitely agree. 1,500 yards, I think, from scrimmage should be the bottom of the barrel expectations. But, we saw Saquon Barkley during his rookie season put up an extraordinary amount of yards, but the success rates weren't there. So where is the balance? Okay. Let's say he hits those yards there, and it's mostly a byproduct of, look, in Naji's case, probably not going to have the explosive plays that a guy like Saquon Barkley had his rookie season, because I don't know, what was it, like 20 plays or so? I think Saquon had, I don't know, 40 yards or more, something along those lines. So we're assuming Harris hits the, let's say, minimum of 1,500 total yards from scrimmage. What is an acceptable, especially when it comes to run? What is an acceptable successful run rate?
I would say you look at, obviously, the Saquon Barkley comparison, and you look at the running styles of the two running backs. Saquon Barkley is a physical specimen when you look at him in terms of height, weight, speed. But at the same time, when you watch him run, he runs more like a Barry Sanders, with the fact that he tries to make so much happen behind the line of scrimmage and tries to evade tacklers. And you don't see him utilize his power a whole lot as a runner, more than what Naji Harris does. Naji Harris has the ability to be elusive in the backfield, try and make defenders miss, but he also has this no nonsense of, I'm going to cut the ball up field as fast as I possibly can and get what is blocked for me, and then try and create after that, whether that's hurdling a defender, going through a defender, whatever it is. He's a lot more, I'm going to get what's needed, compared to Saquon, where obviously in this first couple of years playing behind a bad offensive line with the Giants, it's been, okay, he could go off for 40, 50 yards, or he can get, like in the Steelers game where he had multiple losses and had negative yardage for most of the game. So with the case of Naji Harris, I think that he will definitely see a positive run rate, just because, one, he's a more transcendent running back than what we've had recently in the last couple of years in Pittsburgh, but also to the fact that I do think that the offensive line play is going to improve. So with the run rates that we've had, I mean, and not really putting a good number on it, but I wouldn't be surprised to see anywhere from a 5 to 8% increase, probably nothing like catastrophic, like out of this world. But at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised to see it rise at least 5% success overall, if not possibly push that 8 to 10% success rate.
So anything under than 50%, basically that to me, that's the line. I mean, a good running game should at least have a 50% successful run rate in the NFL. Now, some of your top backs last year were slightly over that. I think the best when it comes to first round picks or whatever, going back, I don't know, 20 years it was Clinton Portis, somewhere around 60, 61%. We obviously don't expect that, but I mean, agree it would be a disappointment if Naji Harris on his own does not come in with at least a 50% run success rate, correct?
Yeah, no, I figured that. I think 55 is a very good number for him to shoot for, just with improved offensive line play. But then also with the fact that the way and the type of runner that he is, where he is going to get what is blocked for him, and he's going to make sure that, he's not going to get caught in the backfield a whole lot, because, I mean, that's the way he was taught at Alabama, and he's coming in pro ready. So I would say 55% is a good number to shoot for, with 56, 57% being achievable, depending on how much the offensive line actually improves.
Yeah, I think Jonathan's on the right level there. It might be, I'd expect it to be probably under 50 early in the season as the offense kind of gets its footing. And then as the farther they get in the season, it should improve. And, as long as he's making those successful runs on, when they need the yards, you don't want to be stuck in the 2nd and 9, 2nd and 8, or like Jonathan talked about, the short yardage stuff. Those are the important runs that we weren't seeing last year that we're going to have to see. And I'm not worried about the explosive runs, because this offense has succeeded without having explosive running backs in the backfield. As long as you're getting the occasional 10-plus yard run here and there, and with their passing game, they should be able to keep it moving. I'm not worried about the explosive runs, just being productive when they need it.
I want to move on to the Steelers' third-round pick, the first offensive lineman. They took one of those guys that could be blocking for Naji Harris in 2021 with Illinois center guard Kendrick Green. Jonathan, I know you did the report on him, but I want to start with Tom here first to get his thoughts on the Green pick and just, a junior with good athleticism, probably some technical things that have to be cleaned up. Where do you come in on the evaluation and valuation of Kendrick Green?
Initially, my first reaction after the draft was he might have been overdrafted. He wasn't
How far?
Maybe a round or two. Maybe
Okay.
Probably early. I expected him, maybe early day 3. But from what I haven't watched a ton of him, but from what I've read, he's got 3 things that you can't teach. Right? He's got the smarts, he's got the athletic ability, and he's got the toughness. You can fix his form. You can add strength. You can coach him up. So they got a player that they wanted, someone with the athleticism that can play in the middle. And he's already came out and said he's going to win the job right out of the bat. So you like the attitude that he has. The more I look at him, the more I like the pick. And you can see he's starting to look like a Steeler, a guy, with that toughness and someone that's going to be in the middle for the next 8 to 10 years. So I like the pick.
Jonathan, you wrote the report on Kendrick Green. What can you tell us more about who the Steelers are getting?
Yeah, so going based off of Tom's initial comments, I came out of my analysis of Kendrick Green with an early day 3 grade as well. Obviously, the size was a little bit of concern in terms of overall height, being just a shade under 6'2", being on the lighter side for normal centers. He had it where he had moments where, in his past sets, he has his head on a swivel. He's looking for work. He has good hand placement. He has a high motor. His movement skills are just freaking incredible in order to get out in open space and being able to pick up guys from the second level, and whether it be when he's pulling from the center or from the guard position. I mean, his movement skills are, they're top notch, but at the same time, there was points in this game where, he had little mental lapses for one occasionally. There was always options. There was occasions where he would slip and he would fall, and it looked like he had a case of balance issues. And I know that's something that you have highlighted to Alex in previous conversations on the podcast. And it was just overall, it was kind of seemed like he was more of a developmental player than someone that was ready to come in and play right away. Hence why we kind of always thought Landon Dickerson or Creed Humphrey would be more of the plug and play center type. But with the move in Matt Canada's offense and what we're hearing initially out of OTAs and minicamp and how much they're incorporating different zone running systems and, the drafting of Dan Moore and the comments that they have made after the draft, that this is kind of something that we're looking into, as well as the nastiness that Adrian Clem, the offensive line coach, is looking for. This guy fits that bill 100%. Dave made the comment earlier that he looks like a bouncer out of the club and how he is just willing to maul people and just go and give them light up shots whenever he has the chance. And he has that to him. And that's something that you like to see in an offensive line that's been lacking nastiness over the last couple of years. And it looks like they found that with this guy.
Yeah, I think it's a really good scheme fit. I think there's potential. I think he's a really good athlete. He's torquey. He's strong. He uses his lack of height to his advantage. But can he play with consistency? Can he have balance? Can he stay on his feet? He's on the ground too much. Those are going to be the concerns there. I want to go down the line and just ask you guys, if you had to guess today, even though we haven't really seen him much in a Steelers uniform, and Dave, I'll start with you. Who is going to be the Steelers Week 1 starting center, B.J. Finney or Kendrick Green?
Yeah, I think it's going to be Green. I don't think you gain much by having Finney be that guy overall. We've said all along throughout B.J. Finney's career, I think, at least in my tape study, at least, is even though he primarily played center at Kansas State, he's a better guard in the NFL than he is a center. And I'd much rather have to watch tape early on in the season, and hopefully I don't have to see that. I mean, hopefully Finney, is a backup and not called on. But I think when you look at across the board and what the downside at the start of the season might be with a Green guy like Green, why not just go ahead and throw the rookie in there and get him rolling there? So I will be a bit shocked if now look, they obviously are not going to let him roll right in there and hand him the job. He's going to obviously have to earn it. But look who he's having to try to earn it against. I mean, you got two guys in Finney and Hassenhauer. Once again, Finney hasn't been great overall at center, in the limited amount of playing time. Look, Finney didn't even play last year. I mean, for all practical purposes, what did he play? Like 6 snaps, I think, all season. Mm-hmm. But weren't they on special teams? I think. But it's not much of a bar to clear. So because of that, I think it'd be very disappointing if Kendrick Green does not clear that bar.
Tom, week 1 at Buffalo, first snap. Who's it going to be, Green or Finney?
If it's my choice, it's definitely going to be Green. Like Dave said, I'd rather see you throw him in there and let him learn on the fly. But the way the Steelers like their veterans and like to go with the safer option, I would not be shocked at all if they throw Finney in there from the get-go.
All right. Well, if you had to guess, if you had to make a choice here, Finney or Green, which one
I'm going Finney.
All right, Finney. Jonathan, what do you think?
All right. So you could look at it from a bunch of different angles here. So I kind of looked at it from Tom's perspective at the beginning, kind of like they like to go with veterans to start. So that kind of gave me the idea of, okay, BJ Finney has played center for them in the past. He has it where he's coming back. But the problem is they're in a new system, Matt Canada-led offense. You're going to see a lot of motions. You might see a lot of movement with that offensive line. And that more fits Kendrick Green's play style than it does BJ Finney. And again, we know that BJ Finney missed all of last year because he struggled to maintain his conditioning and maintain his weight. Obviously, you want to keep that as, hopefully that was a circumstance kind of thing with everything that was going on with COVID, and he'll be able to get his body right here in this offseason. But at the same time, we only know what we've seen so far. And last time we've seen Finney, we haven't seen him, like Dave said, and he's a better fit at guard than he has been at center, much as Dave has highlighted. So given the upside of Green, I think it comes down to the fact if he can get the playbook down at that point in time, he will have the edge over Finney. And while you could say, oh, well, Finney's been in the system before, it is a completely new system.
Right.
And he's not near as mobile or athletic as what Green is. So if I had to guess now, based off of those different factors, I would say Kendrick Green.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Green as well. Better scheme fit, and the Steelers have, I think, transitioned away from letting rookies sit, and they want to get those guys on the field right away. And I think Green will probably do that. Sticking with offensive linemen in round number.
Before we wrapped up here, Jonathan was the one that profiled him, and I think it was somewhere in the middle of March. If I'm correct, where was when you did a write up on Kendrick Green? Am I correct, Jonathan?
Yep, I wrote him up. It was posted to Steelers Depot March 30th, but I probably wrote him up a couple days before that.
Okay, take me through. I'm always interested in this. Doing this for several years myself, I always like to get inside other people's heads here. Where, from the moment you wrapped up that profile on him, did you ever think A, he would be a Steeler, and then B, once the pick was made, what was kind of your initial feelings and reaction of that? And then how have you kind of progressed, I guess, since then? Because obviously we watch a lot more tape on these guys after they're drafted than a lot of times that we do beforehand there. So just take us along in the process there.
All right. So when I got done wrapping up my analysis on Green, projecting him as an early day 3 pick, he was kind of a guy that was seen as a second tier option should guys like, say, Creed Humphrey and Landon Dickerson not be available. And when you're going through the draft and you're pulling your hair out when they decide to pass on Creed Humphrey in the second round to take a guy like Pat Freiermuth, who they had also expressed a lot of love for. So you understand why they did it, especially now that they have expressed their interest in Kendrick Green. But all the while you're thinking, okay, you had this like A-tier guy that you wanted in, say, Creed Humphrey, who was that plug and play guy. And then you settled for a guy that was more along that B tier that, could start, maybe not, probably not start right away based on initial film analysis, knowing that, okay, he's not a finished product. He played more games at guard. He only played in 4 games at center, or only started 4 games at center, played in multiple others. But so you had this guy that's more of a projection, not a sure thing. So that was something that kind of sat with me a little bit. So it's like, okay, when we started the film rooms, like I want to dive more into his tape to understand and see if I can justify being a third round selection for one, when I had him as early day 3. And then also, okay, can this guy start in this offense? Now, with everything coming out about Matt Canada's scheme, how they want to incorporate more zone running or more zone running in their offense with Naji Harris's background with power and zone at Alabama. And then also looking at the article I wrote up with Kendrick Green and pass protection. Obviously, his key asset is his ability on the move in the run game, but he moves his feet very well laterally side to side. And oftentimes he is able to stalemate guys at the line of scrimmage. Sure, he's smaller in stature, but I mean, along with the Florida Gators, I have a clip of him working against the Iowa Hawkeyes, who I spent time with. And there's a play where he puts 2 defenders on the turf in pass protection on the very same play, one of them being AJ Epinesa, who was seen as the dude for the University of Iowa, and literally puts him on his back. So that kind of left me like, oh, wow, this guy really has something to him. And just with that mobility, I think he's a high upside. And while the floor may not be where you want to be compared to, like, say, a Dickerson or a Humphrey, I think that the Pittsburgh knows something that we don't, or we haven't seen yet. And that's something that gets me really excited. So I've really warmed up to the pick, and I'm very happy that he was actually our third round selection now at the end of it.
Would either of you have dared maybe taking Robert Hainsey over a guy like Kendrick Green?
No, I probably wouldn't. I liked Hainsey. I did the profile on him too, but it was one of those things where he was even probably more of a projection at the center position than Kendrick Green was, just because we saw him play mostly right tackle during his time with the Fighting Irish, and then he took snaps at guard and center in the Senior Bowl. Whereas with Kendrick Green, there is film out there of him playing center and succeeding well at center, plus the athletic upside. With Hainsey being more of a limited athlete, you have that upside and that strength profile. I mean, the dude's squatting 700 pounds for Kendrick Green's purposes. So, I mean, I think the upside is better with Green, and you also have proven play from him.
I want to go to fourth round pick, Dan. Tom, do you want to include a thought there?
No, I was just going to say, I think Hainsey, I thought the same thing. Hainsey would be too much of a projection there. I think Green was a better choice.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you guys as well. Moving on to fourth round with offensive tackle Dan Moore Jr. out of Texas A&M. I know we think about his athletic profile, his pass protection, but Jonathan, you highlighted his run blocking. The question is, is he going to be able to fit that bill of that nastiness quota that Kendrick Green is going to bring and Adrian Clem wants for this team? What are you seeing with Dan Moore as a run blocker, Jonathan?
So overall, it was kind of up and down with his play. So his last season was definitely his best season at Texas A&M in terms of run blocking. When you're asking him to down block, he does very well in that aspect, being able to come down on defenders on the interior, whether it be interior defensive linemen or linebackers, and being able to wash them down and clear them out. There are keys, though, in plays that I kind of highlighted in most with him, where it just kind of seems like he wasn't playing with a mean streak or wasn't playing with that nastiness that you want to see, especially in the run game. There's just some times where it just kind of seemed like he was just kind of floating around. And a comparison that I made for Dan Moore Jr. after the selection and after evaluating his run blocking to a similar player and a similar athlete was actually Gerald Hawkins from LSU, who is also drafted the Steelers in the fourth round as a similar type of player that, has a good athletic profile, but at the same time, you wonder if he can be that swing tackle, that guy that can be a key reserve. But I'm starting to question whether or not he will ever develop into being, a serviceable starting tackle, either the left side or the right side, just based off of that analysis of him.
Tom, what do you think about Moore's value, both in the short and long term? Could he have any sort of role in this offense this year, even later in the season? And where do you think his ceiling lies?
As far as using him this year, I think they'll be more likely to use Haig if they need to. Mm-hmm. I think Moore's got some developing to do, but he's got the length that they like. He's 30. I think he had 34.5-inch arms. He's got experience at both tackle spots, so that swing tackle spot may be where he's going to be focused. I think they like Okafor, and I think they like Banner So it's going to be hard to move either of those guys off their spots if they stay with the team.
Mm-hmm.
If you give him time to develop, he might be able to move into one of those spots eventually, but I think swing tackle is his best option right now.
Gotcha. Dave, what do you think about, more short and long-term future is with Pittsburgh?
I tell you, I still, when I go through the tape, I'm trying to find that it factor with him,
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of a jack of a lot of trades, but you don't see one area other than maybe some. I do like his hand usage. I think that's one of the things that sticks out the most with him in the 4 or 5 games that I watched was the hand usage there. So to me, I really get a feel more of a right tackle with him, at least initially, than I do on the left side. Now, obviously, he's played both sides, and who would be the next man up there. But I really get the feel. I'm still trying to find the it factor with him. What is it that made them so attracted to him outside of height, length, height, weight, length, and being a measurable guy and just having the experience on both sides there. Mm-hmm. So, hopefully if things go, well, we won't see much of him, but there will be obviously instances, I think, where he logged some amount of snaps. And obviously if it's on the right side, then something's probably happened there to Zach Banner. And then, on the left side, then either Okorafor hasn't played very well or something's happened to him injury wise as too. But on top of it, I'm not ready to watch Joe Haig take a lot of any snaps outside of a tackle eligible, glorified tight end, if you will. So, yeah, this is one of those picks that still I'm going to have to. It's going to be definitely fun to watch this guy take snaps during the preseason.
Jonathan, if you could just kind of quickly sum up, what do you think attracted the Steelers to Dan Moore Jr.?
Yeah, I would say not only factoring in the fact that he had the arm length and the height and size that they normally look for, but just his movement skills and how it looks they're trying to make that transition to more of a zone-based approach in the run game. Mm-hmm. In his film, you do see occasions with him not only washing down and coming down on the second level to defenders, but you see him climb to the second level very well. He actually pulls pretty well from the tackle spot, and not only on a square pull coming up the hole, but also on a full pull coming out to the side. I highlighted a clip where he gets out on a full pull and leads up 10, 15 yards downfield for Isaiah Spiller in the run game. And that's something that is definitely attractive because most tackles are, obviously our tackles are getting more athletic as time goes on, but to be able to have an athletic tackle that can run 15 yards downfield and pick someone off on a pull or a screen pass or something like that, that's difficult to find, especially in that 4th round value. So that's probably something that really attracted Pittsburgh with just his overall athleticism and his movement ability. But again, I don't see the nastiness of him coming off the ball, trying to put a guy on the ground. So that's where, Adrian Clem is going to definitely be a good mentor for him. And you're going to find out right away, is he going to excel under that coaching of Clem, or is, his little passiveness, is that going to put him in the doghouse? So we're going to find that out right away when it comes to training camp.
And what do you think about his hand usage?
I thought it was good. It was good, not great. So there are points in time where he does very good at getting inside initially on the defender's chest and getting good hand placement, but it seems to fall off with time. That's where that nastiness comes into play. Just that second drive, especially in the run game, where he's going to try and push the defender back. He'll stalemate it a lot at the line of scrimmage, and that's where the defender will stack and shed him. So normally his hand usage is pretty good on initial contact, but then anything after that, that's where you kind of want to see that nastiness come out, because that's where he can get shed pretty easily, or more so than what you'd like to see.
I would just mention 2 other quick things that I think, Adrian Clem obviously is going to be instrumental in his development, but so is Chris Morgan, the assistant offensive line coach. We hear Zach Banner, others talk about how the assistant coach works with the backups more than the head coach does, and Clem certainly has his hands full with the starting 5. So I think Chris Morgan, a former longtime head offensive line coach with Atlanta, is going to be really important in Moore's development. And I know this is a very small thing, but I saw a clip of rookie minicamp they were doing 7-on-7, and Moore was by himself in the end zone, no coaches, no teammates around him, and he's going through, his motions, and he's working on his sets and stuff like that. So I think he's going to be a guy that's going to work hard and try to develop his game. Doesn't mean he's going to be successful, but I think he's going to be a hard worker, and he'll maximize whatever ceiling he may have. All right, guys, I'll move on to day 3, and the Steelers had a slew of picks on day 3, including trading up for defensive lineman Isaiah Loudermilk. Tom, I'll start with you. I want to specifically ask about Quincy Rochet because you wrote the report on Rochet, so you have as good a feel for his game as anybody of this crew. So talk about Rochet and just kind of your overall thoughts on what the Steelers did on day 3.
Sure. Rochet was a guy I actually had rated much higher. I had him as a 3rd round pick, and to get him, I think the 6th round pick they got him, it was just, I think it was nice to see him fall there. He's very productive. He started his career at Temple and was a defensive player of the year there, and then he moved on to Miami for his final season. 54 tackles for loss, over 30 sacks. The best he does is he's can get to the quarterback in a bunch of different ways and uses his hands extremely well. There were several plays where I saw him actually catch the punch of the offensive tackle and was able to push him back by holding his hands. So his hand-eye coordination is really impressive. He's slightly undersized at about 243, and he's processes runs well, but he's got to do a better job of setting the edge. His hands are good and his leverage is good, but he'll peek inside and leave the outside open. Mm-hmm. His motor runs a little hot and cold, and his quickness off the snap can be improved upon. So I think putting him with Watt he'll be able to learn a lot there.
Do you see a comparison to Alex Highsmith at all in terms of the slightly undersized, not uber athletic, but really kind of refined technical pass rushers?
I think I see Highsmith as more of a stronger version and better against the run, mm-hmm. where his pass rush plan is going to develop more as he gets into it. And I think Rochet's pass rush plan is a little more refined right now.
Okay, fair enough. Any other thoughts on day 3 guys I took, whether that's Norwood or Harvin III, Loudermilk, etc.?
I'm very curious about Loudermilk. If they were willing to spend the pick to move up and get him, especially when we thought the defensive line room was pretty full, I'm really curious to see what he's going to do. Norwood is, there's how many defensive backs did they pick up between, free agents? That there's going to be a nice battle to see mm-hmm. who those defensive backs are. And I'm really excited to see what Harvin can do as a punter. The guy's got a tremendous leg. So if they can get him, more consistent, he could be, an asset to the team.
Jonathan, your thoughts on day 3 guys? We didn't talk about the other 4th round pick, the other Aggie, Buddy Johnson. Talk about him or any of the other, day 3 guys that they ended up taking.
Yeah, so with Buddy Johnson, I think that you've done a very good job, Alex, of highlighting his ability to aid in the run game and just how he's able to be in good position, play with his shoulder square to the line of scrimmage. He has that ball get ball mentality. You see the athleticism in his play, but at the same time, it feels like he's almost being chained up a little bit from that 4, 5, 7 speed that we've seen. You almost want to see him let loose a little bit more. So with that, I think that he could play a little bit faster when he gets up to speed. Obviously, he's going from, Texas A&M to the NFL, so we'll have to see how fast he can get up to speed right away. So this year, he might be more of a reserve player, kind of playing behind the likes of a Robert Spillane or a Vince Williams as kind of that 4th linebacker on the depth chart and that key special teamer that he is definitely going to play. But at the same time, I think that he could definitely be in the running for that role next to Bush next year, just based off his athletic profile and to see how fast he gets into coverage. I know Owen has done a good piece on him in terms of working in coverage. I highlighted in an article Isaiah Loudermilk and kind of what may have been an interest to him and kind of correlation to articles that you have posted to, Alex, and especially as a pass rusher because he's only had about 7, 8 sacks in his entire career there at Wisconsin. So he's not a big sack guy for a defensive lineman, but mostly from what I saw from Loudermilk's film, he did win a lot based off of scheme. a lot of twists and a lot of stunts with other defenders to try and get him in advantageous matchups with, say, the running back or the tight end, or get him coming across the face of a guard where he's able to get the angle and be able to work to the quarterback. But you do see a lot good usage in terms of a push-pull move, being able to get a bull rush. The one thing that's very underrated about his game is the ability to knock the ball down at the line of scrimmage and be able to deflect passes. That's something that is very reminiscent to what Cameron Hayward has been known for at Pittsburgh, is getting his hands up in the passing lanes, and also Stephon Tuitt occasionally. And obviously you've heard those rough comparisons by coaching staff saying like, oh, we saw him as like a rough version or a poor man's version of what a Cam Hayward would be. And in no circumstance am I ever going to say that, oh, Isaiah Loudermilk is the next Cam Hayward. By no means is that going to be the case. But you do see the similarities in terms of size, in terms of what they're looking for in that interior defensive line position, because he can play head up. He can go all the way out to inside shade of the tackle if need be. And just his versatility to play that role. And it looks like he is kind of fitting in and kind of showing the coaching staff why they wanted to trade up and get him in the 5th round. So I think that he's going to be an interesting evaluation going into training camp. And it'll be interesting to see where it goes from there with him.
Yeah, he will be. I think he was an easy evaluation for Pittsburgh because he played in a scheme and a system that was so similar. Good coaching with Jim Leonard as defensive line coach, had coached Aaron Donald. So I think, you kind of know what you're getting as much as you can with a guy like Loudermilk. Dave, in terms of day 3 guys, who do you think is going to be the best value? Who do you think is the quote unquote diamond in the rough here?
Yeah, excuse me. I don't see how you choose anybody other than Quincy Rochet here, because this is I think if this guy measures in at 6'4", 275, 280. I mean, he's going off the board as as a 4-3, edge or whatnot. I think he got, some people will get hung up in those measurables there, and he's got the measurables of an outside linebacker. And in this year's draft class, there was kind of it was a good year, I think, to be in the market for a backup outside linebacker in a 3-4 defense. A guy that obviously 2-lane tough, as they like to say, a guy that went over, showed that he could have production in 1 year after moving over. I think he comes off as a very mature player. I like what I see already in pass rush plan for him. I think there's a little bit more athleticism there than maybe meets the eye as well too. Look, I mean, it's not a high bar to clear when you talk about Cassius Marsh as being the number 3 guy. Right. I think there's that look, play. Long and short of it, I don't think it's fair to Rochet to thrust him into the position of being the number 3 guy, almost like Highsmith was last year, or like Highsmith was last year. But if they don't add anybody, I mean, I don't see how you can't end up going that way quickly, because Lord knows we don't want Cassius Marsh on the outside playing more snaps, especially against the run. Now, obviously, Rochet, I think, and I think Tom highlighted this as well too, you're going to have to get stronger and got to get better on the run. That's one of the things that I think most people should be worried about him right now, not only short term, but potentially long term as well too, until they prove they could play against the run. That's it. Bud Dupree, fortunately, wasn't bad right out of the chute there, and Bud had to develop as a pass rusher. I think it might be a little bit the other way around here. We're talking about a guy like Quincy Rochet, but I mean, I was shocked to see him still on the board in the 6th round. I think the extreme value when it comes to later round picks, I think that's where the Steelers won.
Yeah, I agree. But that's the thing about Pittsburgh is you got to play the run. If you can't play the run, it doesn't really matter how good of a pass rusher you are. It's going to be hard to see the field. Last couple of questions here for you guys. Steelers had an interesting pool of undrafted free agents. I think on paper, one of their better UDFA classes in quite some time. And speaking of pass rushers, Tom, you wrote up the report on Oklahoma State linebacker Calvin Bundage, who's kind of an interesting. Is he an off-ball guy? Is he an edge guy? He's pretty skinny, but had 8 or 8.5 sacks for Oklahoma State last season. So, A, where do you see Bundage fitting best, off-ball or edge? And B, does he have a chance to compete for, let's say edge, because depth there is so thin?
He there wasn't a lot of impressive things that he did for me.
Okay.
I think his best chance would be as a situational pass rusher. He didn't process well playing in the middle. He's not very big. It's his best quality is when you just say, go sick him, go get the quarterback. He's got good burst. He can get accelerate quickly when he's got a lane, but he's got I don't see an actual position for him other than being a situational pass rusher.
Were the sacks high quality? I mean, 8 sacks, Oklahoma State, nothing to sneeze at, but was that maybe not as good as the numbers may suggest?
No, they weren't very impressive. A lot of them were, chasing guys down out of the pocket that someone else chased out of there, or he's got solid athleticism, but not someone I would expect to make the team.
Gotcha. Any other UDFAs that you think Steeler fans should keep an eye on?
None come to mind, but like I said before, that whole defensive back group, there's they picked up a bunch of them. The kid from from Kentucky, the one that had the hip issue, or Duke?
Mark Gilbert, from Duke.
Mark Gilbert, he's interesting because he had that good year,
right?
Before these injuries happened. So if he can get healthy, he might be a key find. So let's hope he can stay healthy. We can see the real player.
Yeah, Jonathan, I was going to ask you, the Steelers, half of their undrafted free agents were defensive backs, and there were some interesting names there. Mark Gilbert, as Tom mentioned, Shakur Brown, Donovan Steiner, Lamont Wade. Do you think any of those guys may, rise above the rest to really compete for a spot in the 53?
Yeah, so the guy that initially stands out, and a lot of our guys in the Steelers Depot crew have highlighted him really well, is Shakur Brown. I think that just the writings on the wall in terms of the opening at the nickel corners, the slot corner position, and just with Shakur Brown's play, he's not the greatest athlete in terms of testing that we obviously know. He's not the tallest or the longest athlete. So obviously that kind of hurts him as an outside defender, but I know that Owen again did a very good job at highlighting his man coverage ability and just his production. He had 5 interceptions in like 7 games this past season, which is something that the Steelers have, traditionally looked at the last couple of years in terms of drafting players as players that basically can take the ball away. But he's just very heady. He knows what he's doing. He's in good position. And I think that, being a willing tackler, having a nose for the football, I think that he can be a natural fit at that slot corner position. And he should be able to compete to get a roster spot for that role for Pittsburgh going forward. I did the report on Mark Gilbert, and I had it where I was kind of left questioning what was going on, because he had moments where he looked pretty good in terms of reading the quarterback's eyes, playing the ball in the air, having natural hands in order to take the ball away. But there's also moments where he just flat out kind of lost his man in coverage and just kind of seemed lost at times, especially deep down the field, which is something that you don't want to see, especially from a boundary corner. A lot of his interceptions were kind of more bad decisions by the quarterback rather than him making an exceptional play in coverage. So it kind of seems like his stats were a little inflated, more along the lines of having like 2 or 3 like good picks, whereas like the other 2 or 3 picks that he had on the season were kind of low quality, bad decision, throw up the ball, and he was just in the right spot at the right time. So with him, it's all going to come down to health. I mean, we'll see what happens where his hip's at. Personally, I think that he might have a tough time making it over guys like, Pierre, Lane, if he's in the good graces of the coaching staff. It's just going to be hard to keep him. He might be a guy that makes the practice squad, but again, also being an older player is going to be difficult for him to make the roster.
Sure. Dave, any final thoughts on the Steelers undrafted pool of players?
Yeah, look, I think, as Tom likes to put it, they threw a lot of defensive back mud up against that wall. So you would expect, a speck of that to maybe stick there. And from where you sit right now, you would have to think a guy like Shakur Brown, look, I mean, you can also look at what they paid these guys as far as undrafted free agents and priority undrafted free agents as far as signing bonuses go. Probably not surprising that Shakur Brown's up there at the top of the list there as well too. So I think that's a shot that they're hoping comes to fruition there, and I think that's the main guy to watch. I'm obviously intrigued by Isaiah McCoy out of Kent State. There, did a full contextualization on him. If that's 4.6, man, I don't know, but he definitely is able to get separation on the tape. Now, look, we've seen a lot of lot of talented undrafted free agent wide receivers come through Pittsburgh, and none of them, a lot of them end up going right back out the door there. So no guarantees this kid sticks, but boy, it sure would be nice to see someone like him maybe stick on the practice squad. I think that's the best case scenario when it comes to a guy like McCoy. And then who knows, maybe you have somebody you can work with a deep threat moving into 2022. Odds are obviously probably pretty good that James Washington 2021 might be his last season. Who knows what's going to happen with Juju? I mean, they could be looking to really turn over the wide receiver depth chart some in 2022. So I would think those two, just off the top of my head, would be the two to watch there as far as UDFAs go.
Yeah, I got to talk to Isaiah McCoy, really good guy, easy one to root for, and so I'll definitely watch him, and he'll certainly have, I think, plenty of opportunity here in training camp, especially with that 4 preseason games, the extra preseason game with the Hall of Fame game. So any other final thoughts here on the Steelers draft? I'll kind of run through the order here, and Jonathan, start with you, just quickly, a minute or so, your thoughts on how good or not good the Steelers draft was.
Overall, I kind of came away at first with the Naji pick. I was excited based off of how much talk that we've done on Naji Harris over the last few months, and just, finally the pen was put to paper, it was made, and we were able to finally just start breaking down the player itself even more in terms of how he would be a fit. Like, I thought it was really good to go from night one. The Freiermuth and Kendrick Green selections initially were kind of question marks to me. As I can recall, me and Dave were kind of on the anti-Pat Freiermuth side when we had our initial roundtable discussion. But after highlighting,
I don't think we were just so negative on him, that just where his value was overall. I just the fact, he's a fine. I think his tape, especially his blocking, ended up being a little bit better than maybe what I thought. Initially there, just and I do admit he's probably tight end number 2, but the gap between tight end number 2. Now, is he the best all around tight end in this year's draft class? I don't know. We'll see what Tommy Tremble has to maybe say about that. But I understand why they liked him, why they fell in love with him, why they drafted him. I just not so sure that second round was the place to do it.
Yeah, see, that's where I was kind of sitting on it too, because I mean, you understand the love with him, but at the same time, like, I know Alex said, like, Creed Humphrey was on the board in the second round and you passed on him for Pat Freiermuth, when obviously tight end is a need, and it's good that they addressed it in the second round, but then you have a guy like Creed Humphrey who would be a plug and play option at your center. Obviously they went Kendrick Green instead in the third round, who they liked. So they had their process, and we'll see how their process works out. So that's kind of where those question marks come up. The back-to-back Texas A&M guys is very interesting for me. Obviously we weren't really on Buddy Johnson. I know that Tyler highlighted him like the day before we cut off everything else. So it's just kind of like, okay, that was kind of out of right field compared to other linebacker options. Like, I love Derek Barnes, but he got taken earlier in the 4th round. So like, that was an option. Then obviously Dan Moore Jr. wasn't a tackle that we really brought up as a mid-round option either. So those are guys that, as the offseason goes on, I kind of want to continue to look at more. I'm really excited, though, with this UDFA class, though, compared to years past, much as you guys have highlighted, just actually being willing to spend money, especially at positions of need in the secondary, and looking at next year, too, like Joe Hayden's contract's up. You have it where they rescinded the option on Terrell Edmonds, so he's going to be a free agent after this year. There's going to be a lot of options for these guys to, play early in the preseason, make a mark, and hopefully earn either a role with the initial roster or make the practice squad and, possibly work into a role there in year 2. So guys like Shakir Brown, Mark Gilbert, Jonathan Ziner, who I got to work with at Florida, like all these guys, Lamont Wade, they're going to have an option to make an impact, and it'll be interesting to see. And that's where Steelers Nation needs to pay attention to those preseason games and what DBs are really stepping up.
Should be a really competitive room. Tom, your overall assessment of the Steelers draft?
Well, just like every other year, they never pick any of the guys that I like. But I've learned to get past that, and I trust them now. So, the more I see of these guys and the more I look into them, I like this draft to have a positive impact early and for a good period of time. I think those top 3 guys are going to be, anchors on the offense for a good time to come. Buddy Johnson is another guy I think is going to make an impact, especially on special teams. I can see 7 or 8 of these guys from just the draft picks making the roster. And, I would not be surprised if 1 or 2 UDFA stick around, on the practice squad. So it's a positive draft for me overall. I like where they went. They picked the guys they wanted and that fit the system. So, I think things are looking up.
Just real quick, who was the one guy you wanted them to take who was available that they passed on? Who's the one guy you really wish that you would have heard their name called?
Oh, geez.
You said there were a lot of them. You said there were a lot of guys.
Yeah, the one guy. Yeah, well, there's a lot. The one guy that stands out to me right now is Richie Grant, the safety from Central Florida. I think he could have filled that Mike Hilton role as well as being a backup to the both safety spots. So I think I would have liked to have gotten him. I think he went maybe 2nd or 3rd round. But yeah, he'd be my first pick.
Gotcha. Dave, I know we've talked about it so much, but just your overall quick assessment on this draft.
Yeah, look, I've said this a few times now. I think they go into. I'm convinced they go into drafts when Kevin Colbert's got like 25 names on a piece of paper, and he wants to draft as many of those 25 guys that he can. There, I mean, look, we've got enough Blues Clues over the years, that it's not hard. I don't think, in general, for us to whittle down a good list of guys that we think the Steelers might be interested in. Now, Buddy Johnson obviously kind of flew under the radar a little bit on us. I don't think we did a lot of talking about Dan Moore, but I mean, as far as guys like Naji Harris, not that we were way ahead of the crowd with Naji. I mean, heck, that how many wire to wire kind of major media guys do you see like that? Pat Freiermuth, I mean, I'm not sure who owes who money between him and Alfredo Roberts coming out of that pro. I mean, the attraction there was obvious. Had we known more about Clem and the Illinois Pro Day, it'd been a little bit easier to connect those dots. Heck, you go back and you if you read back, after the draft, went back reading some stuff on Dermontti Dawson. That's a guy that was a guard at Kentucky, right? And, what did he play? 1 game, I think, at center at Kentucky, and even coming out, Dermontti Dawson was a little bit undersized. So even though we're talking about many moons ago, there's a little bit of history there about the Steelers not afraid to go undersized at a guy switching positions. There, the rest of the guys, I knew they were going to take a punter there. They did. You knew they needed an edge rusher at some point. You kind of wondered because they're just the body types alone weren't there. And Alex, you and I talked about that right out of shoot. Where are the 5'4" techs that the Steelers like? Well, there was one. They louder milk, and they had to go up. Or actually, there were 2 or 3 of them. The kid, I think, from Florida State was one of them there. They found one. They went up and got him. I found that to be a little bit surprised. Norwood, we'll see, what happens there overall. But, once again, I think if you go back and, the after the fact rear view mirror kind of draft assessment there, how many of these guys are we really overly surprised are Pittsburgh Steelers now at this point?
Yeah, not many at all, especially when it comes to their, I think, day 1 and day 2 selections. So that is going to wrap up our mini deep round.
Let me ask these guys one question, and I think the fans, the listeners of this show get so much of our input about where we think this team might be in 2021. Let's let both Jonathan and Tom talk about real quickly about where they see this 2000, what are their concerns about this 2021 Steelers team as we sit here today, and the prospects of this team where we sit today in June.
Okay, I'll start. I think the defense is going to be pretty much similar to the way it was. The offense, I think, has a chance to start slow with the new coordinator and the new offensive line. I think things are going to be, it's going to take some time to gel there. I think 9 10 wins is probably right about where they will be. And, they're in one of the toughest divisions in the NFL. So they're going to be beating each other up. So it's going to be, survival of the fittest.
Will you be surprised if they don't make the playoffs or no?
No, I won't be surprised.
Okay. Jonathan?
Yeah. So kind of going off of what Tom said, I kind of think the defense will – with all the losses that they took in terms of Mike Hill and Steven Nelson, Bud Dupree, at first I was really, really disappointed in the Bud Dupree loss in terms of what Alex Highsmith would be going from a Bud Dupree. But after doing more film analysis this offseason and Alex Highsmith's rookie year, especially hearing what you've heard from the coaching staff of how he's just worked his butt off and how he's added a little bit of good weight and how he's been just trying to train for that full-time role and earn it instead of just kind of be given it. I've really warmed up to the fact of Alex Highsmith being the starting outside linebacker outside or on the other side of TJ Watt coming into year 2. So I think the front seven looks pretty good. The secondary is going to be a little dicey, and that's where it'll be interesting to see where they go the rest of the offseason and if they add another body back there, just because, you have your starting safeties. But then with the cornerback room, does Joe Hayden keep up his play, getting another year older? Does Cam Sutton go to the full-time outside cornerback role? What do they do with the slot? Do they bring Cam Sutton back into the slot and transition, say, Pierre or Lane outside? Does Shakir Brown make an impact? You have a lot of questions there outside of the main quarterback with Joe Hayden that just haven't been solved yet. Obviously, Cam Sutton's a good player, but we have yet to see him on a full-time role on the outside. The offense, honestly, it's good because I think that it's a breath of fresh air that the team needs, transitioning away from Randy Fichtner and going to a Matt Canada offense with more pre-snap motion, having it where they're incorporating a bunch of different putting athletes in different positions to succeed, much like Chase Claypool talked about playing in the slot or having it where receivers are moving all over the place. James Washington mentioned that we're going to have to play inside and outside. We're not going to just have our designated roles. So I think that'll be really more difficult for defenses to game plan against. And the addition of Naji Harris and looking for more of an identity in the run game is going to be really good, especially for this team down the stretch. Just kind of looking at the start of the offense or start of the season for Pittsburgh, with opening up with the Bills, and then they follow up with the Raiders, the Bengals, and the Packers. Those are all teams, obviously the Bills and the Packers, known playoff contenders, with the Raiders kind of being in that state of limbo and the Bengals also being in that state of limbo, but could be on the rise as well with the talent that they added. I just see also teams kind of hyping up Nacho Harris a little bit more as a guy. It's okay, the Bills are middle of the pack against the run. Raiders weren't good against the run. Bengals haven't historically been good against the run. The Packers struggled against the run last year too. So if you want to prove a point, especially as an offensive line or as a draftee in Naji Harris, that you justified that pick, you have 4 games slate at the beginning of the season. It's okay, these defenses are known to be not great against the run. Let's go ahead and show them this new run game and make the most of it going into 2021.
Will you be surprised if they don't make the playoffs?
Personally, I would be surprised. I think that they make either that 6th or 7th seed. So I think that the Ravens, especially on defense, are looking to take a step back. I think that their offense obviously will still be good, but they still have moving pieces in that offensive line too, signing Alejandro Villanueva to possibly right tackle. Is Ronnie Stanley healthy? We have a lot of questions with that offensive line. And then the defense, losing guys like Yannick Ngakoue, losing other Matthew Judon. Obviously that secondary is still good, but you have a lot of moving pieces with Baltimore. So who's to say that they're going to be this favorite for the AFC North? And then Cleveland added a lot of good pieces. They had a great offseason, but at the same time, they have to put it together. And they got the better of Pittsburgh in the playoff game, but this is the same team that Pittsburgh throttled the first time that they played them. So what's going to happen the next time that they play?
All right, guys, I think that is going to do it for a mini Depot roundtable. Appreciate you having you guys on. Really good insight, as always. So, again, thanks to Jonathan Hightrader and Tom Mead, and, of course, Dave Bryan. And, again, thanks for having you guys. Thanks for coming on, you guys. And hopefully we'll have you guys back on sometime maybe throughout the season.
And again, Dave, our thanks to Jonathan and Tom for their insight, their contributions throughout the entire draft season when they continue to still write for us and put up awesome work. Tom had a fantastic study the other day on motion rates and, comparing, contrasting things for that I think was going to be really important for looking at last year and then comparing it to what happens this year under Matt Canada. But really good discussion there, Dave.
Absolutely. So glad to have those guys back on. Both of them, obviously Tom's been, you turn around and Tom's been, it's hard to believe Tom's been with us as long as he's been with us. And Jonathan, I think in his front, boy, Jonathan's developed very nicely, just like I kind of thought he would, just like the rest of the guys. And we are so blessed to have the level of talent that we have, contributing on this site right now. And I always learn something new from them. And once again, Tom did an amazing, a great job. He obviously is in charge of the offensive charting department at Steelers Depot right now, and did a great job going over those motions and guys moving from last year, looking at Matt Canada's offense and all like that. So we appreciate that in-depth study there. Jonathan just continuously pours out good content on Steelers Depot as well too. I think he just had a kind of a free agent wish list, if you will, and at the bottom of that one he had Malik Hooker at the bottom of that one as well too. It's got a couple of clips included in that. So we definitely appreciate those guys. And like Alex said, we'll try to get a couple more of these guys, maybe two at a time, 2 by 2 over the next couple of weeks here. Maybe we'll make that the thing on Friday right now, Alex.
Yeah, we are Noah's Ark. Two of every Steelers Depot contributor. But yeah, thanks to them, and really good contributions. And just quickly in terms of what they said, it was funny that Jonathan had mentioned, on the high end of things, but Naji Harris could catch 63 receptions this year, because if he does, that'll be one more than what Chase Claypool did last year, which would be the Steelers rookie record for most receptions by a rookie in team history. So again, I think that's not the expectation, but I think it is a possibility, just because 17 games and how much his team's probably going to feed Naji Harris the football as a runner, and also I think as a receiver.
All
right, Dave, let's get through some reader emails here and close out today's show.
Cole writes in, Dear Alex and Cap Wizard Dave, firstly, I'd like to thank you guys for the great content you provide all year. Secondly, I have a question regarding the salary cap. What would happen if a veteran player gets to training camp, has a season-ending injury, and decided to call it a career and retire? Like what happened in Indianapolis with Andrew Luck a few seasons ago. Thanks, guys. Have a good day. First of all, if a guy, let's say, got to camp and suffered a season-ending injury, he'd probably be put on IR. And thus, whatever he was scheduled to earn that year, barring him being the team working out some sort of, injury settlement with him. If it's a veteran guy anyway, and he's on the roster past week 1, that salary is probably fully guaranteed anyway, if he's got the vested years. So if that were the case, he was to get injured in training camp and have to go on, season-ending IR, was on the roster week 1. Well, nothing really major is going to happen there. Now, if he called it a career after that, whatever the pro rate, if he had extra years left on his contract, if you separate from a player after June 1st for whatever reason, and assuming that salary if that salary was not fully guaranteed, then you look at the, if he's under contract past the current year, you have to look at the bonus proration, the immediate, whatever the proration for that year stays on the books if it's after June 1st, and then whatever remains on the books, assuming he was signed past that year, would then go into the previous year as dead money there. So you really have to look at this on a situation by situation basis here too, because some of these guys might have what's called roster splits in their contract, and even kind of veteran guys, meaning that if they have to go on IR, there is a separate base salary, separate split salary that they would earn versus being on the 53 versus being on IR. I imagine the Steelers do this quite a bit with a lot of these guys. I don't know, the Cassius Marsh. I haven't asked specifically because those kind of things really you don't have to worry about until something like that happens. And then usually you have to get them from like a third-party guy from like Joel Corey or something like that to get the exact kind of language in that, though. But for the most part, if you're looking at a veteran player, and to answer the question, if you get to a veteran player, gets to training camp, has a season-ending injury, then he's probably going to go on IR, and then it all boils down to what his split, if there's a split in his contract.
Yeah, well said there, Dave.
Took me a lot of words to say that, though.
Well,
that's who I am.
That's what these listeners have signed up for. They're aware of that.
Let's see. Brian DeSecco, D-E-C-E-C-C-O, writes in, been a fan of the show for close to a decade now, but I don't think I've ever heard Steelers Depot's origin story. David, sort of sounds like you were an entrepreneur before. Maybe. I'd love to learn what you did before, what made you make the leap to make a business out of Steelers Depot. Also, I'm curious about how the site has grown, how many people work for the site, and where do you see it going in the future? Alex, where do we see, how has the site grown, Alex? How many people work for the site, and where do you see it going into the future?
Well, I think it's grown in every way imaginable in terms of the team, in terms of, I think we've done more video content. We've tried to do different audio content with a terrible take. Hopefully we've gotten just better in terms of the depth and our analysis of it and just trying to be the literal, as the word depot implies, the one-stop shop for Steelers news top to bottom. In terms of just, how it's grown, I think just continue to, keep working at it, and we keep growing things on social media and all that kind of inside baseball, behind the scenes type stuff, and see improvements there. And what was the last question?
Let's see. I think, where do you see it going? How many people do we have? 20, 25? Jeez,
I haven't even counted, but we've grown definitely by leaps and bounds. So, it's probably around 20 people.
We just added a few more recently. Daniel Kitchen we just added, and Clayton doing some work with some kind of advanced stats kind of stuff that we added there. Josh Carney, who's been with us forever, is kind of taking on a bigger role on the site as of kind of really today, to be honest with you. There. So this, it all continues to grow. Now, as far as kind of, how it all started, I was an entrepreneur several times, previously, had a coffee business for, a decade, I think. And just, you probably name it. I've probably about done it, Alex, and got into a point there after selling off my coffee business there where I've always been attracted to the internet and self-taught myself HTML back in, I think it was the late 90s or whatnot there. I've always been fascinated by the flow of information in the internet. And obviously back then it was mostly fantasy football related or Steelers related, trying to stay up to date as best as you could on news and fantasy football stuff and all like that. So that was kind of the root of it. I would build kind of for like local leagues, fantasy leagues, or I'd build kind of crude websites on the old AOL. Do you know what AOL was? Or you're old enough to
we grew up with the discs of AOL free internet.
Okay.
For 50 hours, whatever it was. Yep.
Or GeoCities pages, or what was some of those other free kind of hosting sites? Anyway, I've always been fascinated with how the web works, not just the outer layer of it, but the language of it as well too. So around, I think it was 2008, and I was always fascinated how kind of people made money on the internet on top of it there, and at that time, kind of affiliate RSS feed sites, if you will, were the rage, and there were a couple of programs out that taught you how to do that. So Steelers Depot really originally started as kind of a merchandise affiliate feed site. I was trying to fool around with a program that did that and teach myself that. And that was really the first incarnation of Steelers Depot way back in 2008. Well, you get a little bit more, sell off my business and all, and get a little bit more free time in my hand. And, blogging started to become a thing, a bigger thing at the time. Their WordPress started to really come into light, that platform. And, just the passion for covering the Steelers, like it all just kind of went into kind of one thing there. And obviously the podcast followed a couple of years later, I think, and every year this thing just continues to grow. And I mean, I wake up every morning, I get to I get to read and write and talk about the Steelers. I mean, and then obviously Alex and Matthew were big additions to the site. I don't know, starting 7-8 years ago, I guess, right around in there. And it keeps growing, and we keep trying to add to it. So hopefully that gave enough background there, right?
Yeah, I think so. And yeah, we'll just keep trying to make it better and get back out to camp this year, it looks like. So that'll be really good, and see what the season has in store for us.
I'm trying to see, let's see, other depot. I think we may have hit on that the other day, a couple of days ago. Highlighted show. Yeah, we already hit. Look, we're going to try to have more contributors on the show, and obviously as we get into the off season here, maybe start getting some beat writers back on, especially from some AFC North teams, and all our standbys. And now that it's settling down, have them talk about the other teams in the AFC North and what transpired during the draft and where those franchises are heading as well too. So that's something else to kind of look forward to as the summer progresses.
All right, Dave, we will be back on Tuesday, right?
Yeah. Are we doing Monday? Do we have a
yes.
Live stream Monday?
Yes, we will have the live stream Monday, and then for the podcast, should be back on Tuesday.
All right, so with that, you can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex on Twitter at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com if you got a question. Also, let's see, if you want to donate to the site, go to SteelersDepot.com, hit the donate button, upright navigational bar. If you want an ad-free version of the site, please go to SteelersDepot.com, hit the ad-free button. For $25 for one calendar year, you can have an ad-free version of the site. And hopefully my voice will be even better, I mean, as good as it can be, by Tuesday. So in the meantime, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.